They tried to bury this story decades ago. The files were sealed, the witnesses silenced, and the prophet herself was dismissed as a fraud by those who feared her the most. But the prophecy remained, like a ticking clock, hidden in the foundation of history, counting down to a year they could not erase. That year is now. If you're watching this, you need to understand something before we go any further. This is not a campfire tale. This is not a harmless curiosity. Once you hear what I'm about to tell you, you can't go back to ignorance. You will start noticing things, symbols in the news, quiet moves by governments, the way certain events seem to be lining up with impossible precision. The story begins with a woman named Jeane Dixon. To the public, she was a psychic. To those in power, she was a threat. Because her visions did not just predict small, personal events. They struck at the heart of world affairs. Presidents came to her in secret. Leaders listened to her warnings in private and feared them in public. When she told Franklin Roosevelt how long he had left to live, the timeline unfolded exactly as she said. When she warned a Hollywood star not to fly, the plane fell from the sky days later. And when she described in detail the death of a young president years before it happened, her name was etched into history. But among all the visions that passed through her mind, there was one that she returned to again and again. She claimed the real turning point, the moment that would decide the direction of human civilization, would come in the year 2025. Not as a single explosion, not as one event you could point to on a calendar, but as a convergence. A knot in time where wars, disasters, and power struggles would fuse into something far greater. She warned that a conflict in Asia could shape the balance of the world. She saw rising seas tearing open the floor of the ocean, land appearing where there had been none. And she spoke of a figure, a single person, emerging in the chaos, carrying the power to either unite or end us. The official line, that was all superstition. The unofficial truth? Intelligence agencies monitored 2025 for decades, and as we speak, the pattern she described is beginning to emerge. The first step in understanding a prophecy is realizing that it's not always given in the language we expect. Dixon never claimed to see the future as a clean sequence of events. She saw fragments, images, symbols, and moments that bled together like ink in water. Sometimes they were literal. Sometimes they were cloaked in metaphor. And sometimes they were meant to be misunderstood, until the moment arrived. One of the fragments she described for 2025 was a map, but not the kind you'd find in an atlas. This one was incomplete, edges blurred, with a vast ocean in its center. In her vision, the sea began to churn, and then something impossible happened. An entire chain of land masses rose from beneath the waves, linking territories that had been separated for centuries. She named no exact date. But decades later, another voice emerged. Not from Washington, not from a government briefing, but from the pages of a Japanese manga published in 1999. The artist claimed to have recorded her dreams exactly as they occurred. 15 in total. 14 have already come true. The 15th, the final one, was set for July 5, 2025. In it, a catastrophic event in the South China Sea forces the ocean floor to rupture, birthing new land that connects Japan to Taiwan, Hong Kong, and the Philippines. The parallel to Dixon's vision is undeniable. This is where the story begins to split into something stranger. Around the same time, an anonymous user on a Japanese forum claimed to be a time traveler from the year 2062. He posted warnings before disasters, including the 2011 earthquake that shattered Japan. He told people to seek higher ground days before it struck. Most dismissed him as a hoax, until his predictions proved right. He disappeared, then resurfaced in 2022 with one final warning. The South China Sea will not be calm. Prepare for something never before seen in July of 2025. The odds of 3 separate, unrelated sources, a famous American prophet, a Japanese artist, and a so-called time traveler, all pointing to the same year, the same region, are so astronomically small they might as well be impossible. Unless it isn't coincidence. Unless this date, this location, was marked long before any of us were born. And that's the part you need to hear. Because what rises from the sea won't just change the map. It will change the balance of power in ways you aren't ready for. The truth about prophecy is this: it's rarely about predicting the future for the public. It's about preparing the powerful. When Jeane Dixon first spoke of 2025, her words were not printed in the daily papers. They circulated in classified memos. Intelligence analysts dissected them alongside intercepted communications and satellite images. To them, this wasn't mysticism. It was another piece of intelligence, one that could not be traced to a human source. By the mid-1970s, Dixon's 2025 vision had been quietly logged in a restricted report under potential strategic indicators. At first glance, it read like a Cold War paranoia list. Possible conflict between major Asian powers, disruption of maritime trade, geological upheaval in South China Sea. But buried between the lines was the part that rattled even seasoned operatives, her claim that the true battle wouldn't be fought with armies alone. She spoke of psychological capture, a mass conditioning of the human mind, achieved not through brute force but through controlled reality. According to her, by 2025, information itself would be weaponized with surgical precision. People wouldn't just be misled, they would be reprogrammed to reject truth when it appeared in front of them. Entire nations would walk willingly into traps, convinced they were acting of their own free will. And here's the most unsettling part. Much of what she described didn't exist in her lifetime. But it exists now. The algorithms that shape what you see online, the targeted persuasion campaigns, the deepfake technology that can erase or create history in minutes. To Dixon, the geopolitical flashpoint in Asia was only one half of the danger. The other was invisible. The psychological control grid that would ensure when disaster struck, the masses would beg for the very solutions designed to bind them. She warned that the moment of convergence in 2025 would be marked by three signs: a sudden, global economic shift triggered by a regional crisis, the rise of an unknown leader in Asia, not from politics, but from commerce, a coordinated worldwide narrative that insists the event was unforeseen, despite the fact it had been known by a few for decades. Ask yourself this: how many of those signs are already in motion? And if we're already inside the setup, what does that say about what's coming next? The men who read those reports in the 70s never spoke of them publicly. They didn't have to. Their job was to prepare the machine. Our job was to never see it until it was too late. The deeper you go, the more you realize. Prophecy doesn't stand alone. It's a thread in a much older weave. Dixon's 2025 warning is unsettling on its own. But when you strip away the dates, the geography and the names, you find echoes of the same event in places most people never think to look. Ancient records, forgotten prophecies, even ritual calendars from civilizations we're told had no contact with one another. In the I Ching, China's ancient book of changes, there is a cycle that completes every 64 years. The end of the cycle is said to bring a violent reshaping of both earth and power, storms, floods, and sudden shifts in rulers. The current cycle ends in mid-2025. Across the ocean, in Mayan long count calculations, there's a minor but potent Bacton turnover, not as famous as 2012's, but noted for signaling the rising of the earth from the waters. This turnover also aligns with 2025. Even more obscure is a Sumatran maritime text, the Chronicle of Toba, recorded by traders centuries ago. It describes a great trembling under the southern sea, followed by the ascent of a bridge of lands that unites islands into one. Scholars dismiss it as myth. But if Dixon's visions and modern seismic models are right, the area described in the Chronicle lines up almost perfectly with the South China Sea fault zones now under close watch. Why does this matter? Because when the same warning appears in unconnected cultures, across thousands of years, you are no longer looking at coincidence. You're looking at a cycle. And cycles don't care if you believe in them. They come whether you're ready or not. Here's the part they don't tell you. Elite circles know about these cycles. Not in mystical terms, but in cold, strategic ones. They plan decades ahead, positioning assets, alliances, and narratives to take advantage of them. When the Earth moves, they're not caught, off guard. They're waiting. Dixon may have been a prophet, but her visions fit into a timeline far older than her life. The question you need to ask is not if 2025 marks the end of such a cycle, but what the next one begins, and whether you're meant to survive it or be shaped by it. The cycle is not just natural. It's a trigger, one that certain powers wait for like clockwork. Geopolitics, when stripped bare, is not about ideology or morality. It's about timing. The most decisive moves in history are rarely made at random. They're executed when the world is already shifting beneath people's feet. And the 2025 cycle is exactly the kind of shift that hidden operators thrive on. In the months leading up to a predicted upheaval, you'll notice patterns if you know where to look. Unusual troop deployments in regions not under official threat. Sudden acquisitions of agricultural land by shell corporations tied to offshore trusts. Quiet but aggressive buyouts of freshwater reserves and rare earth mining operations. All of it moves like pieces on a board, toward the same endgame. Certain intelligence communities maintain what's known as event contingency playbooks. These aren't public. They outline how to exploit, or in some cases accelerate, events that destabilize the masses. Earthquakes, famines, pandemics, economic shocks, and yes, political assassinations. The goal is always the same: consolidate control while everyone else is too distracted, too desperate, or too afraid to resist. 25's cycle, tied to Dixon's prophecy and the older warnings, is already baked into these playbooks. Private military contractors have been quietly signing year-long contracts with flexible redeployment clauses, the kind that allow forces to move instantly to unforeseen hot zones. International finance circles are shifting liquid capital into hard assets, specifically in regions marked high resilience in global stability simulations. And while the public narrative will be one of reaction, responding to the crisis. The truth is that many of the moves will have been planned for years. For some, the earth-shaking is a disaster. For others, it's an opportunity to redraw the map. When the cycle hits, it won't be a single event. It will be a chain reaction. Nature triggers chaos. Chaos triggers intervention. Intervention triggers control. By the time you realize the game has changed, the pieces will already be locked in place. The elites aren't asking whether 2025 will change the world. They're asking how much of that change they can own. Control is never just about force. It's about consent, or at least the illusion of it. When the cycle turns chaotic, those who've prepared for it won't just move troops or assets. They'll move minds. Every crisis comes with a ready-made narrative, and it's fed to the public before the public even knows they need it. First comes fear. Images and headlines will hit you from every angle, faster than you can verify a single fact. Death tolls, grainy footage, tearful interviews. They won't need to tell you how to feel. The overload will do it for them. In this phase, fear is the glue that holds the narrative together. Then comes division. You'll see a sharp split in the way events are framed. Every issue will have two extremes, both screaming at each other, both certain they're right. It's the oldest trick. Make the population fight itself so it can't unite against the real source of control. Finally comes acceptance. After weeks of instability, the same powers who seemed powerless at first will suddenly step forward with solutions, emergency laws, surveillance expansions, asset seizures for the public good. By now, people are exhausted, desperate for normalcy. They won't just accept the new rules, they'll demand them. The manipulation is surgical. Algorithms push different narratives to different groups, tailoring fear and outrage to each profile. A protester and a loyalist may live on the same street, but inhabit completely different realities online. And while they argue, the architecture of control is built quietly in the background. This is why the 2025 cycle is dangerous, not because of the event itself, but because of the systems waiting to seize the aftermath. And the cruelest truth: by the time most people realize they've been manipulated, they'll already be enforcing the very rules designed to keep them in place. Before the storm hits, there are always signals, small, precise changes that barely register in the public's mind. But to those watching closely, they're alarms. The prophecy speaks of markers in the current, events and shifts that ripple outward long before the crash becomes visible. One of the first is sudden policy alignment. Leaders who normally bicker over every detail begin speaking in strangely unified terms. They use identical phrases, as if reading from the same script. For the safety of all. Temporary measures. Cooperation for stability. That kind of alignment doesn't happen by chance. It's a sign the decisions have already been made behind closed doors. Then comes economic choreography. Interest rates, commodity prices, and foreign currencies start moving in patterns that don't match the headlines. It's not chaos, it's deliberate positioning. A crash is rarely an accident. It's engineered to occur at the most profitable moment for those ready to exploit it. The third marker is information constriction. Certain stories vanish from the news cycle without explanation. Journalists pivot to safe topics. Online searches yield fewer results, with fact checks replacing original reports. It's not censorship in the obvious sense. It's a narrowing of the funnel, making it harder to see the edges of the picture. Those who have seen previous cycles recognize these signs, but the average person, they see them as random noise. That's the beauty and cruelty of it. The markers hide in plain sight. The prophecy warns, when silence grows louder than truth, the river is already bending. And right now, in 2025, the silence is deafening. The rupture never looks like the movies. There's no single explosion, no dramatic announcement. It starts with a fracture, a moment when something the public takes for granted simply stops working. It could be the markets. One morning, key indexes drop faster than analysts can explain, wiping out billions in hours. Or it could be infrastructure. A sudden blackout in a major city, no storm, no warning. Sometimes it's quieter, an unexpected bank holiday, with frozen withdrawals and technical issues plastered on every ATM screen. At first, officials will smile and speak softly. Temporary. Contained. Nothing to fear. But behind that calm veneer, the cracks widen. Rumors leak through the gaps, not from news anchors, but from truckers on radio chatter, factory workers, mid-level bureaucrats. They'll talk about supply shipments halted at the border, about government data centers going dark, about quiet meetings that run until dawn. This is the stage where reality still feels negotiable. People cling to normal routines, school runs, grocery shopping, evening TV, while an invisible clock ticks down. But underneath, an unease takes root. Conversations turn guarded. Neighbors start storing extra fuel, withdrawing more cash than usual. The rupture isn't just in the system, it's in trust. The sense that, for the first time, those in power might not have control. And that thought spreads faster than any headline. The prophecy calls this the shiver. Not yet panic, not yet collapse, but the moment when the herd feels the shadow on the edge of the field. The point of no return comes without ceremony. It's not announced. It's imposed. One morning, the language shifts. The smiles are gone from the podium. The words are harder now. Mandatory, restricted, enforced. Overnight, laws that took decades to write are replaced by directives no one voted on. Borders close, but not to keep others out, to keep people in. This is when the curtain is yanked back, revealing the machinery that's been humming in the dark for years. Surveillance isn't just in your phone, It's in your power meter, your car, your shopping cart. You don't get a knock at the door. You get a text that says your movement is temporarily limited for public safety. The financial grid is the first to be restructured. Not shut down, reshaped. Digital credits replace cash, each transaction logged, each purchase scored. Those who comply see their limits raised. Those who resist watch their accounts freeze overnight. The streets are quiet, not because order has been restored, but because uncertainty is a more effective leash than fear. People begin policing each other, afraid that a careless word could cost them more than money. The prophecy names this phase the veil's collapse. Not because the truth is now visible, but because the lie is no longer necessary. Those in control have no need to hide. They know it's too late to stop them. And from here, there's only one question left. Who will adapt? And who will disappear? The resistance doesn't announce itself. It moves like water through cracks, invisible until it's already under your feet. It starts with whispers in places no one's watching. A gas station at midnight, a dim back table in a diner where the cameras are broken, an abandoned radio frequency older than most of the people using it. These aren't militants at first. They're the ones who saw the fracture early. Truckers who mapped every back road, engineers who kept parts of the old grid running off-book, archivists who downloaded records before they vanished. They don't wear colours, carry flags or post slogans. They carry tools, codes, and the names of people you can still trust. Information becomes the new currency. A single hard drive can buy more than gold. A working generator is worth more than a car. And the most valuable thing isn't weapons or money, it's time. The ability to move before the next clamp tightens. The new regime calls them criminals, terrorists, destabilizing influences. The public repeats those words at first, but quietly, a few begin to notice. Food shows up where it's needed. Blackouts end in neighborhoods they pass through. The sick disappear from state-run wards and reappear healthy weeks later. The prophecy calls this the hollowing. While the surface looks unchanged, the foundation is being eaten away. The structure still stands, but one day soon, it won't. The first strike isn't loud. It's precise. 3 cities wake to find their grids offline, not from sabotage, but from a silent override of the central controls. Trains stop. Surveillance drones drift lifeless in the sky. The new regime's emergency channels flicker, then vanish. For 6 hours, there is no voice telling people what to do. And in that silence, something dangerous happens. They start talking to each other again. Neighbors meet in the street. Strangers share food. People who hadn't locked eyes in months look at one another without fear. The resistance doesn't claim credit, but the signs are there for those who know where to look. Coded marks on alley walls, a sequence of lights in apartment windows, an untraceable message broadcast for exactly 40 seconds on an old AM band. This is not over. The regime scrambles to restore control. Checkpoints multiply, curfews are moved earlier, but they can't undo what's been planted. For the first time, the people see the system falter, and they remember it can. The prophecy calls this the breach. Not because the wall has fallen, but because now everyone knows it can be cracked. The retaliation comes fast, like a storm that's been waiting just over the horizon. At 4 a.m., loudspeakers crackle to life across the cities. The voice is calm, almost kind, as it announces a temporary security measure. By 6 a.m., the streets are crawling with armored patrols. Every intersection is a checkpoint. Drones hum low, scanning faces, tracing heat signatures inside homes. They call it a stabilization sweep. In reality, it's a purge. Anyone suspected of aiding the blackout, or even speaking positively about it, is taken. No trials, no explanations. Doors kicked in. Whole families gone before breakfast. To make sure the message sticks, the regime stages public renewals in the plazas. A man is brought forward, hands bound, accused of hoarding medical supplies. They strip his mask away and force the crowd to watch, as he's erased from the database. Name, record, existence, as if he never lived. The prophecy calls this the winter of silence. Not because of snow, but because for months after, the streets are too afraid to speak. It begins with a whisper that isn't supposed to exist. Late one night, on a closed government frequency, a faint transmission slips through. The voice is distorted, broken by static, but the words are unmistakable. The third gate is opening. To most, it's meaningless noise. But to those who've studied the prophecy, it's the trigger they've been waiting for. The third gate isn't a place. It's an event. A moment when the regime's own systems align in such a way that the walls between control and chaos thin to the breaking point. Across the underground, people start moving in patterns only they understand. In abandoned subway tunnels, coded signals flash from flashlight to flashlight. On rooftops, fires are lit in shapes that only look random from the ground. The regime senses something but can't pinpoint it. They tighten curfews, deploy more drones, run endless biometric scans. Still, the signs spread, tiny cracks, like frost creeping across a pane of glass. The prophecy says the third gate will not stay open long. If they miss this chance, the city will remain in chains for another century. The plan is not about brute force. It's about precision. One strike, in one moment, that will rip the regime's grip wide open. The gate is a flaw buried deep in the central control nexus. Every 77 years, the system resets a core protocol, briefly lowering its own defenses. That window will last exactly 9 minutes and 40 seconds. The resistance has prepared for decades. Smuggled components hidden inside antique radios, code etched onto the backs of old photographs, identities erased so completely that even friends can't be sure who's who. The strike team is already in place. Not soldiers, but engineers, archivists, and the quiet ones who've survived by never being noticed. Each carries a fragment of the device. Alone, they are harmless. Together they could unbind the digital chains that hold millions under watch. But the gate is guarded. If the regime realizes what's happening, they will flood the city with force, and the resistance will vanish before the 9th minute ticks away. The prophecy calls this moment the hour without a master. The 9th minute hasn't started yet, but the city already feels like it's holding its breath. In the old financial district, the strike team blends into the pre-dawn shadows. One by one, they slip through service doors and forgotten maintenance corridors, moving like ghosts through the skeleton of the city. Above them, drones sweep the streets, their searchlights cutting across the fog. Each beam passes a fraction of a second too slow, as if something unseen is interfering. Maybe it's luck. Maybe it's the prophecy already at work. The fragments come together in a room that no longer appears on official schematics, a chamber of steel and glass buried beneath the nexus. In the center stands the core, a column of pulsating light, humming with the weight of every name, every file, every secret the regime has ever collected. They work in silence. Cables connect, codes unlock. A low pulse begins to build, syncing with their heartbeats. Somewhere above, alarms start screaming. The 9th minute has begun. The gate is open. There will not be another. The core's hum rises into a shrill, almost human scream. The lights in the chamber flicker, bathing the strike team in alternating shadows and blinding white. 90 seconds left. They push the final sequence through, fingers moving faster than thought, as if the code has been living inside them all their lives. The core begins to fracture, not physically, but in its logic. Pathways collapse, firewalls turn inward, attacking their own architecture. On the streets above, screens go black. Surveillance feeds vanish mid-frame. The drones stutter in mid-air, then plummet like dead birds. For the first time in decades, the regime is blind. 60 seconds. The core's light flares so bright it burns through closed eyes. Then, with a sound like a breath being drawn in, it implodes. Every locked file, every buried truth, floods back into the world in an instant. When the light dies, the chamber is empty. The team is gone. No trace, no bodies. Some say they were taken by the gate. Others believe they became something else, woven into the city's veins, watching from the shadows until the next prophecy stirs. The hour without a master had come and gone.